Today, I had the pleasure of speaking with Ash Jafari. Ash is an AI investor and the author of the substack AI Future. Before investing, he was a financial analyst at AI leader Nvidia, a software product manager, and a tech entrepreneur. Today, we discussed AI as a service, as opposed to software as a service, Dall-E 2 and other large language models and vision models, and also, of course, Tesla and Tesla full self-driving and the Teslabot. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I am pleased to be here with Ash Jafari today, and we are going to talk about the 3 articles you recently published. Basically, is AI going to take your job? So that's pretty much the question for us to answer today. So anyway, yeah, I guess first just give us a quick kind of overview of the 3 articles. I will leave the links to them all in the description. I highly encourage reading them because they're very well written and they really go through a lot of details that we probably won't cover. We'll probably gloss over a bunch of that stuff today. So yeah, just take it away and sort of give the overview.
Sure. Well, actually, I'm an AI investor, so I came at this from a investing standpoint at first. And as I started to kind of peel back the layers of the onion and started to kind of piece together, tweets from, like OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, and doing research and kind of everything that's happened over the past couple months, especially in AI, I saw, okay, there's not just all these opportunities, but there's all these challenges. So first I saw, OpenAI with Dall-E 2, and for those of you who don't know, it is an amazing kind of image generation, art generation, AI model that's now, just as of last week, commercially available. It's in beta, but commercially available. And I saw that, wow, they have over 1 million customers on their wait list. This is kind of the opening strategy to kind of really kind of go into this, what I'm calling kind of this AI job suite market. This essentially AI as a service to, pick, do you want a graphics designer for your business? Do you want a writer? Do you want a software developer, marketer, et cetera, et cetera? And that's not, we don't have all of that now, but, in the coming years, that's what I think is going to happen. And so then the second article, I really kind of dive into, okay, which of these jobs are going to be affected? I actually applied a labor economics overview, as well as brought in some like innovation and different frameworks. What I try to do is really take in a cross-disciplinary lens, using kind of my background and just kind of what I've learned and researched over the years. And then this last article is that more kind of, investor hat, or, at least kind of like business strategy hat, and looking at, basically what I kind of call the 3 AI eras, at least in terms of commercialization in AI. The first era starting in 2012 with deep learning. This second era, this kind of forgotten era that seems like, isn't really talked about or known, which is what I was calling that kind of AI as a service, AI job suite. And then third era, in the future, AGI, artificial general intelligence, like a super intelligence, or, at a human level intelligence kind of AI. So those are kind of the 3, 3 articles.
Yeah, and I think maybe we can share the screen in just a minute, but I think that's a really interesting thing, because people are like, the sort of deep learning, they're like, okay, we've already kind of saturated the market. It's really grown quickly. And then everyone's like, AGI, or artificial general intelligence, it's like far away. We don't have to worry about that yet. That's a ways away. But they're forgetting the thing that you're talking about is this kind of middle ground, which is really cool, which was why I was like, oh, I got to get in touch with you and do an interview here. Before we continue though, just give a little insight into your background and why you would know about this kind of stuff. I think that's really interesting too.
Sure. So I started my career at Nvidia in 2008 as a financial analyst for their core GPU business unit, and also what would then become the data center business that we all know of, for their AI business now. But at the time, Nvidia was a graphics card company, a gaming company. Many of us know it from gaming from the 90s and 2000s and so forth. And they were right about to transition into something much bigger than that, and to take on a company 30 times their size in Intel by going into parallel computing, launching their CUDA software development sort of architecture and essentially ecosystem for all of this machine learning. So they had all these kind of like case studies of 100x speed ups in medical imaging and high speed financial trading. But I was working very closely with a general manager for the data center business at the time. The revenue was so small. It was so small. And I was dejected. I was like, where is the AI and robotics and
it's kind of amazing because you said that in the article, and it's like looking back on it from now, it's like, well, of course, Nvidia was huge, and this was always going to be. It was a manifest destiny or something. But I guess
it wasn't when I was there from 2008 to 2010, and it was ultimately too early. But I wanted to get closer to the action of actually being part of the product. So I went into product management and entrepreneurship, worked at different financial tech companies, and then Facebook, Meta. And on the side, I was still very much an enthusiast. I'm not an AI researcher. I'm not an AI expert, but definitely like an enthusiast and kind of piecing together my experiences from Nvidia, entrepreneurship, business school, and being at startups, going from very small to IPOing and kind of seeing the exponential growth within a company, and trying to apply those different lenses to, what we saw in AI, and then ultimately got to, starting the Substack, which, I'm happy to tell you kind of like a quick little story of how that genesis came about. So I had all of this kind of going in my mind again for the last 15 years. And one thing was the last couple of months, there's just been incredible growth or amazing achievements by various AI models from DeepMind and Google and OpenAI. But it was really one conversation with a very close friend of mine. He has a PhD in computer science, over 10 years of experience at the biggest tech companies, lives in Silicon Valley. I was telling him about Google's AlphaCode, which is basically neural network, a model to do coding, and it's supposed to be. Google says it's 60% better than GitHub Copilot, which is something that's available right now commercially. And he was very skeptical, and I get it, because deep learning at times has been overhyped. Right. But on our call together, he started kind of researching and looking, and he came across an AI researcher that he really respects, who was vouching for it. And his whole kind of tune over the 15 minutes changed from like, what are you telling? Like, what is this? To like, he literally said, I need to really study up on this. And, he's kind of he has this expertise, worked in Silicon Valley all his life. So the takeaway for me was like, wow, like if this guy doesn't know it, what chance does, broader society and then, regular people, let alone like people who are in technology, but not AI researchers and so forth. So that's kind of the genesis, was I'm seeing it at least differently than other people, or, again, maybe piecing together like kind of the exponential, innovation frameworks and business frameworks, and then kind of like having some understanding of the AI side as well, and my time at Nvidia and so forth.
Right. And I think you're not the first person to mention it, obviously, but the fact that human beings are terrible at exponentials. I think your example is like, take 30 steps across the room and you're like, okay, I'll get from here to that, no big deal. But 30 exponential steps, what is it, 26 times around the earth or something, So it's just absolutely crazy when you think about that. Or the other example of the old Chinese proverb about the guy who was like, if you fill up 1 grain of sand on the first piece of the chessboard and then double it every time, and then by the end of the 64 pieces of the chessboard, like the guy's bankrupt because he's had to give his entire kingdom's worth of rice. Sorry, not sand, a grain of rice. Yeah. But anyway, this kind of things where our brains just can't handle this kind of like progress. I think it's sobering. It's important for us to realize that we're bad at this. And so we shouldn't just say like, oh, my experience says that this is impossible, it can't happen. It's like, no, it really can happen.
Sure.
Yeah.
And maybe just to kind of tie back to Tesla a little bit, because I know, I'm actually a fan of your channel. That's
Well, I was going to talk about full self-driving shortly, but yes, go for it.
And thinking about full self-driving, it's been many painstaking years of like, where is it? And in kind of really thinking about this exponential trends, I thought, well, maybe we're just, at step 20 of the exponential. Right. And I have a graph where it basically shows there's like still no movement. And then step 30 of an exponential, you're around the world 26 times.
Right.
And then, this is something I think Elon had mentioned in a tweet many years ago. And I really picked it up because of my time at Nvidia. But he says, there's a double exponential, and we don't know the implication of that. What he means by this is hardware, Nvidia, is literally defying Moore's law. In that their rate of improvement is much, much faster than Moore's law. So the hardware for AI chips is getting exponentially better. At the same time, the data, the amount of data, the AI architectures, the software is getting exponential better. So you have kind of these two layerings of exponentials. And I think Elon's take was like his mind was blown just off of that. And my mind was blown just off of one exponential. So it's a really, really fascinating time.
So instead of squaring everything, instead of doubling it, you're quadrupling it every time. So you're just like, I have to say, like, just as a little plug for my company, Artomatic, we actually got invited into the Inception lab, NVIDIA's Inception lab, which is really cool. So we now get access to a lot of their GPUs through Amazon Web Services. So the democratization that you talk about is actually something else that's really cool about it, is that my partner and I have talked about this. For like 10 years ago, we didn't have Google like collaboration software on the web. We didn't have access to these massively scalable computers. We couldn't really have started our business 10 years ago without a couple $1 million investment, in hardware and all of this other stuff. And now it's just like straightforward. You can scale from zero effectively, and that's pretty remarkable too.
Right.
But I think to talk about Tesla, it was referencing back to the fact that people just don't understand from the outside. And when I do things like drive people around or something like that, they don't understand that the car is driving. I keep saying that, and they're like, no, clearly you're driving. And it's just, it's like, no, for real, the car is actually. And so my son, who lives in New York, and, I don't see him super often, but when I was visiting him, I was like, you drive it. And he was like, holy crap. It was one of those things where like, you don't realize it until you're in the driver's seat, how much it's actually doing. And so, I think you're right. I think we're at step like 15 or 20 or something, right? And it's just like this, but I think what's the line you said? Once it gets to 1% efficient, it becomes 100% efficient really fast.
Really fast.
Yeah. And so that's the thing. It's like we're kind of right around there right now. And it just might, in a year, it just could go,
right.
Just shockingly.
And I think Elon has mentioned a couple of times, it's going to be super fast. It's exponential. But, and as he mentioned, what happened with them is they keep hitting the plateau, like in terms of on the software side or the AI side. Not on I don't think on the hardware. They're hitting the plateau, but now they think they have the right architecture, as well know, to get there. Right. So the question for this AI, this AI jobs, what OpenAI is doing, or Google, or what like long-term AGI, like are there caps? Are we going to cap out and stall progress, or is there like a permanent cap for AGI?
Right.
For example?
Right. Actually, let's take a look at that. You have 3 things. Let me see if I can, or do you want to share your screen? Do you have the articles up right now? Otherwise, I can do it.
I do.
Okay. Yeah. Do the 3rd article. It's the one where you have the 3 jobs, the order. Maybe it's the 2nd article.
Yeah. So we could maybe kind of, do you want to focus on this one? Is that?
Well, I mean, we could start with that. It was just that 3-tier thing of like what the order was. And I think it was most of the way down
was it this one?
No, I think it was the 2nd one. It was the one from the 21st.
Okay.
Yeah, down towards the bottom of that.
Yeah, and this is just the kind of the visual. Right. Yeah, that's the visual going around 26 times.
Right.
And then this is another visual where, again, I'm just showing, the exponential steps starting, 10, 20, this is my point, or what I was thinking, is Tesla FSD here, it's exponential, but it's only 20 steps and then still almost no movement. And then once you get to 30, it's like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people are used to seeing it like sideways, where you see the graph is like just flat and then it goes like that.
Exactly. So I try to flip it to, and for me at least, this really clicked more so. So I hope it's helpful. Did you want me to go down more?
Yeah, it's yeah, I think it's towards the bottom.
Okay.
Wait, yeah, there it is right there. Yeah, the 1, 2, 3 thing. That one.
Got it.
So you're saying that your prediction is that the first people whose jobs are going to be disrupted are creative jobs, which is interesting because that's not what I would have thought. But like software development, graphic design, writing, photography, and then it'll be people like accountants and lawyers and stuff. So.
Yeah, and this isn't really my prediction per se. I think it's kind of becoming more of a mainstream prediction. So Sam Altman, who's the founder of Y Combinator and now CEO and co-founder of OpenAI, a while back tweeted something to this effect, like creative jobs counterintuitively are going to go first. We thought it would be like the manual labor jobs that would go first, but that's going to be probably the hardest to automate. So, and that's where like the Teslabot and robotics comes in, but the creative jobs.
And I guess that's just because of the physicality of it, right? The first two categories are all software based ultimately. So, a computer has to have no dexterity. It could already just live in the box that it's in and be able to do its job. Essentially,
the first category is software based, and I think there's just a ton of data. There's a ton of photos out there. There's so much writing out there. There's a lot of designs out there, and software code is out there. Things like once you start talking about like project management, it's a little bit more, it's I guess amorphous. It's harder to kind of pin down and point to like where is the millions of data points. Of project management tasks and so forth. So
it's, I guess, messier data. I mean, there's probably a lot of data is just messier data. But the interesting thing to me, of course, is that I would think that there would be, being in a business myself, like attorneys and accountants and stuff account for a great deal of our expenses at this point. So there would be an economic drive to, if you can replace a lot of those tasks, like drawing up contracts or doing the sort of CPA type of stuff that you have to do. If you can have an AI do that for you and you can pay like 1/10 the price, of course people are going to do that. So that's obvious that number 2 is going to happen as well, as soon as there are reasonable alternatives.
And I believe I believe there's startups out there. I remember seeing some in the kind of paralegal space using, I don't know if they were using GPT-3 or some other AI, but basically, doing the whole like legal research and legal whatever preparation drafts. That's already something, at least in the very beginning stages.
Right. And that makes sense. I mean, in terms of having a lot of data, my gosh, the number of contracts and legal documents written there, So as long as you can get a hold of those and, suck them all into the data machine, you've got a lot of stuff there. The one thing, and, you said this wasn't, your predictions, but I tend to wonder about Tesla disrupting number 3 because of the Teslabot. And again, AI Day is supposed to be September 30th or AI Day number 2. And we'll know a lot more by then, but there does seem to be the possibility that what we could see is that this area number 3 could be disrupted much more than we expect it to be, much more rapidly, because if they can handle the dexterity thing and handle some basic tasks, then suddenly you could see a lot of manual labor go that way too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is all getting kind of, everything is cascading. So for an example, I have another post. I think my first post was about artificial general intelligence and what the experts are now predicting. Basically, what's happened in the last 6 months is all these experts, like the co-founders, CEOs of the DeepMinds and OpenAIs, are publicly revising down their predictions like rapidly, like 50%, like a huge revision down. And it's kind of falling into kind of maybe the 2030 to 2035, maybe 2040 range, whereas before it was 2050s, 2060s.
Right. Are you talking specifically AGI here at this point?
Specifically AGI,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I'm saying if that happens in 2030, like if that could happen in 2030, and then we're getting the Teslabot in the kind of 2025 to 2030s,
right?
Maybe the automation of some software jobs and some of these jobs in the 2025s. I mean, they're all kind of coming together, and it's just going to be. Right. I mean, what if the AGI kind of happens just a few years after some of these jobs go? So for example, AGI potentially maybe could come here in between 1 and 2,
right,
or between 2 and 3. And that's just something else to maybe think about.
Yeah. Do you have any skin in the game about AGI versus physical embodiment? I don't know, maybe it's being very human centric, but I have this sort of like intuition that being embodied is going to help an artificial intelligence become more like self-aware, conscious, whatever you want to call it. I don't know if you've thought about that at all, or if that matters to you, but
I've thought a little bit about it. I mean, I think I think in terms of practicality, there's so much that can be just still done by just software.
Right.
Yeah, it'd be great to have a personal robot, and to have, especially in the business settings, right, in the factories. But like just a software, like something on my screen right now that can understand me, see me, right, take care of all my like emails and projects, and plan out my trips. Plan out optimal things for like teaching my kids, various math concepts, and just doing all of that in a fraction of a human time frame. Like, right. I think that could be incredible. But of course I want robots, like right. Who doesn't? And the Teslabot,
the cool robots. Yeah. I think you touched on teaching, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that's scary too, because I definitely see how eventually AI is going to be better than me at teaching. Because I'll interact with students as much time as I can during regular school days and stuff, but an AI tool can be there 24 hours a day. If a kid wakes up at 3 o'clock in the morning and wants to learn stuff, the AI can be there, right with them. So I can definitely see teaching being disrupted by AI. One thing I think we should definitely, I don't know, sort of like make very apparent is that AI can be incredibly useful without being general intelligence. So I think of it as like a tool versus a person. So you can have really, really, really smart assistants. Like you say, like having a little computer that's on the, or a little bot that's in your computer that like does things for you and stuff like that. That's great. It doesn't have to have consciousness or, general intelligence to be able to be a really, really good assistant. It can definitely do that stuff. And I think that's that S curve that you're talking about. I don't know if you have that particular.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. The kind of triple, well, not just that, but I was talking about the 3 ones with your one in the middle.
Right.
Yeah. This one right here. Yeah, right there. So yeah, talk us through that one.
So, back to kind of the Nvidia days, that really sparked this. There's a competition where using 2 Nvidia GPUs, the researchers at the University of Toronto really kind of kickstarted this whole deep learning, which then changed up all the market caps of all the companies we know today in terms of tech. That kicked off roughly in 2012. So these are kind of the 3 AI in terms of commercialization eras. That's this deep learning, and it's an S curve. This is like looking at what's kind of the adoption, but they're all kind of layering into one another. And on the flip side, some people also see this artificial general intelligence. Like if you're in kind of tech, you might have heard about this AGI. That's, again, whether that's 10 years from now or 40 years from now or never, that's kind of the mother of all S curves. And it's really off this graph, because that's, that could basically do everything that humanity does. But in this middle is there going to be a time where there's basically, this service that you sign up for from Google or OpenAI or others, where you just kind of, as a business, you check mark, yep, I want a graphics designer, I want a paralegal, and and again, I published one of these before Dall-E was commercialized last week. And then because I said it's going to get commercialized and it's going to be like this, it's going to be based off of usage pricing. And that's what they did, a usage pricing. So I think my takeaway was, I think everyone was looking at Dall-E, at least up until recently, was, this is an interesting maybe research tool or kind of a creative fun tool. And,
right.
And for me, I saw, hey, they're saying, they're tweeting about having over 1 million customers on the wait list. And this is like the first foray into this AI job suite. And I think it's worth maybe discussing a little bit about some of the kind of common counterpoints of the AI automation.
Right.
It's like the first I would say is the most common one is like humanity automated the agricultural industry. Like 99% of humans were removed from it, but we didn't kind of squalor. We went into factories, we went into offices. Right. And so we're either going to kind of level up, be able to do better, like work on the farm, but, in the management and so forth, or we can reskill. So those are kind of the two examples.
Right. I think the big thing about this, though, is like, if you look at the agricultural industrial revolution, it happened over hundreds of years. This could potentially happen in a decade. Like
that's a great point.
It's a different thing if you have multiple lifetimes of people going by versus like, holy crap, this could happen by 2030, 2035 or something. Right. So, and I think it's really nice to dissociate AGI from incredible usability. Like, it can still totally be a tool, but it can just be such a good tool that you don't, and I hate to say this, but in a way, a graphic designer is a tool. Like, you give them a brief, you're like, here, I want this, 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 and this in this image, and it's got to be this big, give it to me. And the person provides it for you. They're effectively operating as a tool in that case for you as a client. And so if you have an AG, or not an AGI tool, but a specialized AI tool or something like that, it can do that, and it can do it for pennies on the dollar and a lot faster.
Literally, it's incredible. And so kind of just to kind of bring like a really solid example to this. So, and talking about those counterpoints. So let's just say you're a company and you have 4 graphics designers on staff, and Dall-E comes out, it's commercialized now, and it automates, let's just say 10% of their day, of their tasks can be now done within, a minute, a few seconds even. Great. Now they could level up or work on more, attend more meetings,
take longer lunches,
get more work coming in. Right. Company's happy. They're still gainfully employed, but there's a continuum. So at some point in automation, and again, the AI, because of hardware exponentials and because of software exponentials, it's getting better and better. So whether it's a year from now or 10 years, it's looks like it's going to happen. And at some point, let's say it's 50% of their tasks in a given day can be automated, or 80%. At some point, there just isn't enough work, like just labor supply and demand. There just isn't enough work that their company can give them. And like, unfortunately, I think, 1 or 2 or 3 of them will eventually have to get laid off.
Right.
So people are like, okay, fine. Like, okay, I get it, but humans can then reskill. We could just reskill into
we'll
new
just
things.
Become writers instead. Oh, whoops.
Or there's just and it sounds valid at first, and I kind of bought into these arguments a while ago. Is there's going to be jobs we can't even think of yet. Yeah. Like data science it's kind of like data analyst, but it's a little bit different. Maybe there's things like that, but then my kind of how I kind of see it is you're going to be in a race against the AI models, because AI is gradually going to expand its scope and take on adjacent things. It's going to do like financial analyst stuff, then data analyst, then operation, then data science. And as it kind of does that, what's going to win? Is it going to be the AI, or is it going to be the human kind of career, what's it called, continuum, which takes 1 year, 3 years, 4 years to retrain into a new job? Right. Or I think what I could say is maybe some people will succeed because maybe like you were a marketer before and you could just go back into that, right? So I think some people will maybe at least in a short term like retransition, reskill, but for the vast majority, like millions of people or tens of millions of people that will need to transition, I just think it's going to be a race against the AI models, which are getting better. And again, I came out all of this to paint an optimistic picture with all my friends. I'm talking about like biomedical breakthroughs of AI and all this in Tesla all the time. But then, this kind of just stood out to me. And I think we're just, at the cusp of this.
And I think one way to think about that again, and I've said this particularly about Tesla's full self-driving, it's like a human being. So I think you have younger kids you've talked about, and I have kids that are ranged out, but every single one got to 15 years old, then had to have a year of teaching them how to drive. Then they got their driver's license. And then they took another 2 or 3 years before they were good drivers. But once one Tesla gets to be a really good driver, all Teslas are really good drivers. It's like, damn, you just completely short circuit the whole everybody has to do this by themselves thing. It's just like suddenly, or, once Dall-E gets good, Dall-E is good. It's not like every little baby Dall-E has to be taught, it's like there's suddenly whatever implementation of Dall-E all has that same knowledge. So it's just incredible to think about that, just the rapidity with which it can take over an area.
Right. And I think maybe kind of, again, bringing it to Tesla is, like even just 2 years ago and any time before that point in time where Tesla was 10x, 20x cheaper in market cap, if you look at analyst reports, they're factoring outside of ARK Invest, $0 to anything, or even to the EV disruption. They were they were factoring it in, but not to the full extent. So, I think analysts do a great job at, and the market too. Just kind of the market is efficient. The stock market's efficient in the near term. Short term, maybe a year out or a couple years out. But like long term, if I was sitting at Nvidia at 2008, 2010, who could have? To imagine that it could be 100x its size, and similar with Tesla. Seeing that when there's a mismatch, that's when there's an opportunity, right? That's what happened with Tesla. It's still an opportunity with Tesla because people still don't believe in FSD maturing, and then certainly they don't. Robotaxis is not baked in, and then potentially with this, with AI too, or AI specific companies. Like there's a chasm of like, okay, what's built into the price models and what's built into the market sentiment. But when you have a mismatch, you could have an opportunity. And it's not like this is going to necessarily, like none of this is going to 100% for sure happen. It's all probability based, but you assign a probability. Like what's a probability Teslabot will occur by 2030? It's not 0% and it's not 100%. So similar with this, it's not that graphics designers are necessarily all going to get automated away, or even some get automated away by 2025 or 2030, but it's a non-zero percentage in my mind.
So I think as always, it's good to point out we are not financial. Well, you have been a financial analyst, not operating as a financial analyst here. So, we're just talking, we're just a couple of people talking about this stuff. So, do your own research, all that blah, blah, blah stuff. But anyway, I think it really is important to think about how it's just hard. As a human being, it's hard to keep up with all the different areas. So you're saying, like, as an investor, it's like, how does the market keep up with this disruptive technology? Let's say, like, I've seen a lot of automotive, actual financial analysts on big time, MSNBC, whatever, talking about things, and they just don't seem to get what's actually going on. But I think it's because, they've been doing this for a long time, and this is the way cars are, and that's the way they're always going to be. They don't really have that, like, oh, this is just about to get flipped on top of itself, flipped on its head.
Oh, absolutely. They don't, having that kind of exponential mindset, having, and not just a mindset. I mean, you saw, I showed I mean, this is actual,
Right.
This has happened time and time again. There was an S curve showing since 1900, like refrigerators to internet to phones, showing the S curves. And what's happened, if you look at that or go back and see that in the video, it's becoming increasingly vertical, which means what that means is, like, when the smartphone came out, it's getting to 80% adoption in like 5 years, 7 years, whereas refrigerators might have taken 30 years, 40 years.
So I think that chart has color versus regular television, black and white. And like, even that, like, you see the S curve of black and white TV, and then its color goes like, whoop, so it just completely like elides that. I can't remember if that's in that particular graphic or not, but I remember
there's a few graphics like this that you could find online.
Color TV and then regular TV. Yeah, so there's like black and white versus color, but you can see it just like the color TV just goes boop, just like, and that's just a couple of decades difference in terms of when they started. So it's absolutely crazy.
So yeah, I mean, there's that there's that mismatch. And yeah, I mean, again, you could wear, like I tried to just bring in the different hats I had from an investment standpoint to kind of business to working in tech. And I think, again, even my AI friend or PhD friend, I mean, like, if you just have one hat, you might not be able to see everything super crisply or clearly. But if you kind of have, or, if you read a lot, follow other, do your homework, listen to other people. Like I watch you, for FSD. I've been watching you for a long time about, like, what to get a really solid grasp of, like, where are we? What's the limiting factors?
Did you watch the video I did just this morning? It's the top 20 things that are still missing. So
I just did. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, cool.
And it's funny because I had my own list. I have my own list I've tracked for a little bit of time and shared with a friend. But I mean, I've been racking my brain around that same thing. Like, why is it? Is it going back to like the exponential chart? Like, what's been the factor? And and what's remaining? So that's been super helpful. That was a super helpful video for us.
I think there's two pieces to this, honestly. And one piece I think people have heard about a lot, which is exponential growth. Nobody understands. And it's true. What you need to do is actually look at charts like what you're showing right here. You have to actually like see the data. You can't just like imagine it. But the other piece of this is, and this, like, I actually know because I've been a researcher my entire career, is that in retrospect, it's always obvious how something's done. But when you're doing it, the number of wrong turns you can take or dead ends or whatever it's like being in one of those giant mazes, right? You're walking around the maze and you just keep bumping into walls. And it's like, and honestly, you don't even know that there's a center to this maze. Like this is a maze where you don't even know that there's a solution to it. So you just keep bumping into walls and hope that eventually you get to the right place. And so I think that's also part of it. It's like, right? Tesla's talked about this. They go, whoop, and then they hit a ceiling and they're like, oh crap, we have to totally re-architect everything. Okay, what's the latest research? What can we look at? And Transformers are the latest thing. I was like, well, try Transformers. And it's like, oh, but it is possible that they go boop and hit the ceiling again and have to think about something else.
Yeah. So, it's I was gonna, I totally blanked on what I was going to say to that. Sorry, I'll probably come back to it.
Oh, it's okay.
There's a lot to unpack. Oh, I was going to say, I think, when I think there's a term for this, but when you're an expert and when you're, or working as a researcher or engineer on something, there's just so many different, like you have a list of 100 things that could go wrong, or like on a rocket, like SpaceX, right? There's a list of so many things that could go wrong. So when people ask you, when the press comes and asks you or asks Elon, what's the probability of success? He usually says something a lot lower than what I would have thought. He says like 30%, because he's thinking about all of this. But maybe if he was one step removed, like, or not him, but let's just say an engineer, you might be able to adjust it up. I just think back again to my PhD friend. Like, if you're too in the weeds of AI, you're not really thinking about AGI. You're not thinking about like labor economic, applying a labor economic lens to this and an innovation lens to this. So I think, the same thing could be going on with robotaxis as well.
Right. Yeah. And that's a good point too, is that there are, gosh, I was reading about this. They're like the idea people and the completion people. Like, so you have to have people who have the big ideas, but then there's got to be people who will get in there and like keep iterating until they figure it out and make it work. But there is a tendency when you get into it really deep that you become that little rat on the wheel, right? You're just spinning and going like, why aren't my results getting better than 85% right now? What's going on? And you just kind of lose track of the big picture of what's going on. But it's important to have both of those, obviously, because if you don't have the people completing each individual task, you don't ever get anywhere.
Sure.
So,
and some of the best, like Elon, he's great at both of those, right? He's a huge visionary. I mean, and maybe that's part of his huge part of his success.
Right.
Another person I like to highlight who doesn't get enough attention, but is up there is Nvidia's co-founder CEO Jensen Huang, who I had a pleasure of working at his company and kind of interacting with him a couple of times. But he like, who has a vision of going from like taking your company to working on gaming to supercomputing and the hardest medical and science problems and parallel computing. And oh, by the way, let's like take on Intel and take on the CPU and make the GPU the new CPU.
Right.
Like in the process, I mean, and that's why they've ballooned up in market cap and success. And he's been named as one of the, I think, #1 CEO in various like Times and Business Week publications in the past couple of years, because he has the same vision but execution mindset.
Right. And it's also just the kind of ballsiness to just go like, yeah, why not? I think Elon specifically said that about SpaceX and Tesla. He said he gave them both less than 10% chances of like not going bankrupt, right? And it's that idea of like, sure, we'll take on Intel. Anybody else nowadays, people will go like, yeah, we'll take on Intel. But if you're talking about in the early 2000s, nobody was that stupid.
No.
It's like, who's dumb enough to try to take on Intel? It's like, well, why not?
And Nvidia beat out something like 50 or 100 other graphics cards companies in the 90s. I mean, that in itself was a huge feat to emerge as the first. And actually it became the only graphics card exclusive company. And then AMD and Intel. But, it's funny, all these companies are now working on AI, AMD, Intel, Nvidia, Google itself on the hardware side. They make their own hardware chips, but they have so much demand that they still need to purchase like Nvidia chips and maybe some other.
Because they make the TPUs, the tensor processing units, but I don't think they can make enough of them. Which, I know, again, neither one of us is a hardware expert, but I don't think hardware gets enough love. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, all the best algorithms in the world are not going to get anywhere unless you have some really, really smoking hardware to run that stuff on. So, that co-evolution of the software, but also the hardware that just has to continuously improve. And like you said, beating Moore's Law, which is, Moore's Law looked like it was going to completely stall out. And then it's like, wait, parallel processing. It's like, just go.
And like, just for your viewers, like every year, NVIDIA's new processors are 3 times better than before. And what is Moore's Law is twice as good every 2 years, or 18 months, every 18 months.
I think it's 18
so
months.
It's a big difference. On that compute note, Ray Kurzweil, who's like the famous futurist. He's also been a director of AI at Google for over 10 years. And his prediction rate is like 86% accurate, going back to all his books. He was doing kind of like an exclusive, like kind of private conversation with his it's called Singularity University alum. And he was basically saying, like, this is an April recording, that the limitation right now is not, there's no real bottlenecks in terms of to get to AGI in terms of algorithms. It's the biggest thing right now is just more compute, basically saying more hardware, better hardware, faster. But there's a couple things on the AI or the software algorithmic side that need to improve. But it's the compute. So and Tesla's, I think, grappling with that, which is why they started Dojo and are trying to ramp that.
Yeah. And you know, that's one of the things, I think, honestly, the biggest thing that is probably going to keep them from reaching full self-driving for cars that are currently out is hardware, not software. I think that hardware 3 is really reaching the limits of what it can do. This is from the outside in. I don't know for a fact, but you know, from the evidence I've seen, it sure seems like they're going to need hardware 4 to like really bump it up a lot more. But you know, but we'll see.
Yeah.
There's a lot of very smart people working there, so.
Yeah, I guess one question for you on that, when you did this top 20 post video today, and as I was watching it, I was thinking about, specifically, I think number 2 was the midterm planning. So it's like the merges, and I mean, you said that's the worst part, and I would agree of FSD. And I guess my question to you, as the AI expert, is our transformers and what they're doing right now, is their current architecture enough, or you're saying it is enough, but the hardware is what's lacking?
Okay, well, let me put it this way. If you could somehow take their giant Nvidia GPU cluster that they're running right now, and I know they've got Dojo also coming online, but just take the one they currently have. If you could somehow squeeze that down into a little box and stick it in the back of a car, it would full self-drive like better than in F1 Formula One drive, because clearly it would have so much compute power that it would be like no problem. Also, your battery would last about 3 seconds, and then you'd have to stop and recharge. But anyway, I'm just saying, I think that it really is a significant deterrent to being able to get there, because they have to keep. I mean, it's engineering, right? Engineering is always about compromises and trade-offs, but I think that they are really stuck in terms of their hardware capabilities, and they're just trying to figure out how to squeeze more and more out of it. So, one thing they could do is release hardware 4, which I know they've had taped out for quite a while, but that's expensive, because you've got how many million Teslas on the road right now? That's a lot of cars that need new software or new hardware put in them.
Yeah. Do you think do you think Elon would do it in terms of replacing it? I think he would, in terms of, it's a couple thousand to replace each one, times a few million cars. But if they and in order to do that, they would know if we could solve FSD and robotaxi, that's going to more than make up for the revenue and the cost. But
I have a feeling what might happen is they might do it at cost. So let's say it's $1,200. They'll throw the labor in for free, and they'll just charge people. And if you want to upgrade and have access to the latest and greatest, the problem that's going to come in is like, okay, I paid 10 grand for full self-driving, but I'm driving hardware 3. And then you're telling me I have to spend another $1,200 to get it when I already paid for it. So maybe people with subscriptions would have to pay for it, but people who've already paid for full self-driving won't, or because if you talk 2 million cars times $2,000 a car, that's a lot of money. So
it is a lot.
4 billion. That's not a small potatoes kind of thing. So
it's a lot. Yeah. And I would imagine, though, they would know from their test suite, from their cars internally, that they would retrofit, like, hey, yes, this did solve level 4, level 5, or no, it didn't solve, before they made that, would have to make that decision.
So I could see kind of a middle ground. Let's say they can get to, because a lot of people think full self-driving is like a line like this. It's like finish line, we're over it. It's like, no, it's just always getting more and more nines, right? It's just getting better and better and better. There's no finish line ever. So I could see them saying like, okay, John, your version, your Model Y with hardware 3 in it, will be able to drive you 99% of the time without hands, but under some circumstances, you'll have to take over. If you want to pay some extra money, we'll get you up to 99.999 or something like that, right? We'll get you much closer. Or if you want to loan your car out as a robo-taxi, you have to pay for an upgrade, So they could do kind of a thing where they let you do pretty well with the current hardware, but if you want the latest and greatest, which a lot of people will go ahead and pay for, you pay for the upgrade. So
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I would totally pay for the upgrade, so long. Well, in general, just for this time saving, but especially if
Right.
I could turn around and make that money in a week or a month, like it's a
Right.
no-brainer.
Yeah, I mean, I've been considering very hard paying the extra $2,000 for the little speed boost upgrade, for the extra like 0.6. It's like, if I'm going to pay $2,000 for that, why would I not pay $2,000 for something that would drive me around? That's obvious. So, so what car do you have? What Tesla? Or do you just drive
So I started with the Model 3, and then
Okay.
we also have a Model Y.
Okay.
We needed something bigger for transporting a kid.
It's the good family car, right?
Yeah. So pretty happy. Very happy with those two.
Right.
But,
so I mean, we've been on this for a while, so I'm not going to keep you forever, but I did want to touch on the kind of the big picture thing, because you've mentioned it a couple of times. I think I mentioned it once, but we keep saying, like, a year ago, I thought this. And what's happened in the last year? I mean, I think I have an idea, but I'm curious what you think has happened in the last year that's changed everybody's mind so drastically.
Yeah. So, starting, I think it was around December 2021, just 7 months ago from the time of this recording. DeepMind, I believe, did they release Chinchilla or Gopher? They're all named after various cats. Yeah. And then basically every month since then, and Gato is the latest one, and then Google released this thing called Palm.
Right. They also released Imagine, which is a competitor to Dall-E.
Yeah, so, and Dall-E, and then there's this Minerva one. But basically, when you look at the rate of progress, it's just like mind blowing. These last 6 months, I call it kind of like the AI spring, or 2022. The progress has just really cranked up. Like, people were blown away by GPT-3 2 years ago, of like, hey, this is not human, but it's like this blew us away from what a computer could do. And I have a graph in one of these charts, but basically, let's see if I could quickly find it. But basically, the new ones are just so much better than those. So you got that, and what's happened is there's this community prediction website called Metaculus, which some people might be familiar with, and the notion, there's a lot of research showing that kind of community prediction and expert community prediction is like one of the most accurate ways to forecasting.
Right.
And they're like AI timelines and AGI timelines have just dropped off a cliff. And again, I would put more stock in the AI expert timelines, which again, those have dropped off or plummeted in a good way. So it seems like it's all happening really quickly. I would love to hear your thoughts. I don't think we're ready as a society.
We're never going to be ready. I mean, that's without a doubt. If science fiction has taught us nothing, it's that we will not be ready. So I mean, I totally agree with you. I think it's ARK Invest always says this from a financial thing, but they always say the longer the baseline, the bigger the bounce is going to be when you actually, get over the baseline. And so I'm kind of thinking we're seeing that same thing with research. There was like all of this research that was going on. And I actually, embarrassingly enough, it was somewhere around October and November of last year. So just about the time when all this stuff started happening, I did a video that said, is the golden age of AI over? And I have a picture of like an AI in the sunset. And so people can go find that video if they want. But I was like, I think we're reaching the end of the algorithms. We're reaching the end of the hardware. And then, and then all of a sudden it was just like bang, 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 bang. All these papers came out, and I was like, what? So clearly I was wrong in that prediction. So, but yeah, that's I mean, when was that? Early 2019 GPT-2, and then early 2020 GPT-3.
And I wish there was another line here on this chart, but I have other charts where, the significance of this is actually Palm came out and it's even better than this, but they haven't done this particular benchmark.
Right.
But the significance with Google's Palm is that it's better than humans, the average human, in a variety of different kind of reading comprehension and in terms of various different kinds of benchmarks. And then they came out, something based off of that was called Google Minerva. Right. That was looking at this math data set which only had, look at this accuracy level. The math data set, the best in class was like 6 to 8%. And it came out a month ago and it's at 51%.
Right.
Like just blows it out of the water. And for context, again, I think context helps. There's a PhD in, what was he? He was a PhD in another PhD in computer science, not my friend. He scored 30% on that test. So PhD student in computer science, 30%, this one, 51%. This is only 2022. And you could go look at Metaculus now. Everyone has like really raised their forecasts to much higher levels.
I don't know that particular model, but in general, this is just a language model, right? It was not fine-tuned to do math problems. Or was it fine-tuned?
It was, I mean, it was trained on.
Oh, it was? Okay. Because there also are like a bunch of these more generalized models. I mean, I'm thinking of Gato, which is much more generalized, but like that, you could take GPT-3 and ask it a math question and it will, if it's relatively easy, it will give you the right answer probably, which is because it has nothing of that in its data set. I mean, it just picked up from all the crap that it read. It picked up 2 + 2 = 4 and things like that, but nobody taught it. It's just something it knows. It's like, it's crazy.
Do you think, I made this analogy, I think in this post that went live today, but the analogy between my time at Nvidia where CUDA and GPUs was like the spark that lit the 2012 deep learning to now curve or era. Right. Do you think, we talked about like all these advancements in the last 6 months, do you think transformers were, and maybe plus the increase in compute, was that what has done it now?
I think transformers were if you look at when GPT-2 came out, or GPT-1, essentially that was transformers. It was a proof of concept to show that it worked, but it was not just transformers. So that was 2017, but it was when people were like, oh, transformers don't just work for language. In 2020, they were like, oh, it works for pictures. Then in 2021, they were like, oh, it works for video images too. And then it was just like, the floodgates opened. So Andre Karpathy's talked about that, where he's kind of like, this is a common thing. It's like data is data. Doesn't matter if it's language data, image data, music data, video sequence data, whatever it is, it's just digital bits. And so if this thing can learn one of these, the likelihood is it can learn the other ones too. And so I personally think it was transformers that caused this explosion this time. So it was like a software development, not a hardware development this time. Although CUDA is software. I mean, obviously uses the hardware, but that was also a software development.
Yeah. And and the hardware has gone a lot better. And each year it's getting, 60% or 2x, better and cheaper and faster. So it's riding on that, but I think you're right. Yeah. I think it is the transformer as a main thing.
And there's some foundational stuff. Like number one is you couldn't have done this actually 10 years ago because there just wasn't enough compute hardware, but also like memory, throughput, all of those kinds of things to, because it's not just how fast the processors are, it's like how fast it can get the data back and forth, because we're talking about terabytes and terabytes of, probably more than that, probably petabytes of data that these things have to train on in order to be as good as they are. So all of that stuff, so that's why I said it was the longer the baseline, right? We've got all of these things that we're building and building and building, and then all of a sudden it's like, boom, here it goes, so.
Yeah. And, it's just gonna be a wild time. I mean, maybe, on a positive, uplifting note, I think imagine curing or, managing all the diseases that we have today. That's something we don't need AGI for that. Like you said earlier, we could just have a very sophisticated, narrow AI doing that. And right now AI, there's a company called In Silico Medicine using Nvidia and doing amazing things with drug discovery and doing things just many times faster because of AI. So there's so much potential. Robotics, caring for elderly, self-driving cars, saving 1.5 million lives globally per year. So many opportunities. And like with any technology, there's opportunities and challenges. We have, I think our challenges are 2 big ones. The biggest one is AI safety and alignment. If we get an AGI, like that's
as long as it's a tool, no problem.
Elon has a few choice words about that. and actually has done a lot in that realm to help kind of fund some of the nonprofits working in that. And then second one is, again, more near midterm, is this job, the disruption or displacement of jobs, because I don't think it's just going to be a tool that enhances your work for forever. I think it's going to grow more in a tool. And again, it's going to hit this kind of like, there just isn't enough marketing to go around, or, enough, whatever to go around when you have the labor part of it getting displaced.
I think, you're definitely too young to remember this, but I can remember the printing disruption that happened with things like Photoshop and stuff, and Quark Express. And, there was a whole industry of people that did layout, like physically putting things on paper and then transferring it and then printing it. There was like it employed a ton of people. And now you open up Photoshop or something, some sort of thing, like now it's, heck, you can do it online, and you just do that, print it on your laser printer that you have sitting at home, and it requires 0 people in between you. And it's incredible how many people were disrupted, but that was just one industry. What we're looking at here is like all of them. It's sort of like the potential is everybody can get disrupted.
Absolutely. And I mean, maybe the new, they went into other jobs, right? They were fine, but that was before AI, so maybe there's new jobs we can't think of yet, and maybe in the metaverse, right? Like maybe again, it's hard to imagine that the AI won't be able to do those jobs, take over those jobs quicker than humans can retrain as millions and tens of millions to do those jobs.
Right.
Like that's what blows my mind. And I think, hopefully, hopefully the DeepMinds and OpenAIs of the world are thinking about this. I know they're thinking about a lot in terms of safety and ethics, but I think this thing, in terms of this kind of AI as a service, is kind of I don't know. I think it's like creeping up on us, and it wasn't really. Everyone's kind of focused again, like I was saying, is on deep learning or AGI. Like if you're one of those companies, you're kind of focused on AGI mostly, or just advances to get to that. Yeah. And if you're like a regular tech company, you're just focused on deep learning. So. Right. Yeah.
And again, what's happening is we're seeing those little teeny exponential steps that are growing, but it looks like a flat line right now. But it's all flat. Any day, it could be a month from now, 2 years from now, who knows, but it's going to go and take off. While you were talking, I had this thought, like, what if we could get like AI-lon, like the ultimate AI CEO, like, and then you could just have Elon running all the companies, right? It would just be crazy. Like that's the kind of nuttiness. I mean, it doesn't even seem realistic, but why not? Right? If it could take over a CEO's job, you could have the best CEO at every company. So it's just
and
crazy.
What do we do? One thing we didn't talk about yet, or what do we do as humanity? Like what's meaning in life? How do we will have to assign new meaning, and hopefully it's one that's positive, and spending more time with friends and family and grandkids, and maybe creating. There's still probably going to be always a demand for like little human-made trinkets and designs and art.
Our entire species is going to become those people on the side of the road that you stop at and they make a little coconut art or something like that.
That's hilarious. Yeah. Or are we going, or is a vast majority of society going to just be in kind of like the metaverse and gaming and just binging Netflix, or a mix of both? But I hope it's the former. I hope, there's positive, productive ways, whatever that may be for each person. If this all does bear out, and then until we use Neuralinks and merge with them, I think like Elon, that's probably the ultimate thing that makes sense, is like, humanity at some point would merge with these and go like the movie Her, like you just start working on things that are not even in our dimension of consciousness. Like we can't even think about right now because we're not intelligent enough.
Oh gosh. Wow.
But
I mean, this is like, I guess we might, unless you have final thoughts, we might as well wrap it up with that. I think the whole topic, I don't know if we're going to encapsulate this whole conversation, This is all happening way faster than any of us thinks it is, including the two of us. I mean, we're sitting here confronting it, and it's still hard to wrap my brain. Maybe not you, but for me. But so it's happening faster, and it's going to be really, really big.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, actually, I reached out to you 6-7 months ago, way before I just started this Substack a week or 2 weeks back. But that I reached out to you because of that. I said, like, am I looking at this right? Because it just feels like this is boggling my mind. So I think the more of society that can understand that, the more we can engage in a conversation and be, hopefully, I guess we won't be ready, like you said, but I don't know.
At least you'll have heard of it.
Have some inkling.
Yeah.
And start making plans with your grandkids and your loved ones of like, okay, well, we should probably hang out every day at 2 p.m. and go golfing rather than once every 6 months.
Right.
Start making those plans.
Hey man, I don't know. At this point in my life, I'm like, I could see retiring. That wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So, cool. Well, thank you so much for chatting. Again, for everybody, we just touched on the 3 articles. Everybody should read the 3 articles. So definitely go read the articles, subscribe to your Substack. That's awesome. And I don't know. Thank you so much for talking about this. And hopefully we'll be able to carry this conversation on in the future too. And, have another video where we can talk about some other things. Who knows?
Would love to. Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks so much. See y'all later, everybody. See you. Bye.
Bye.